The storm rolled in from the ocean at dusk, its thunderheads black against the bleeding sky. Lightning flashed purple over the broken towers of Providence, revealing vines that writhed up the skeletal frames, like snakes tasting the air. Each jagged bolt sent a fresh shiver of luminescence through the growth. The plants responded to electricity the way most foliage answers sunlight, unfurling metallic green leaves in a slow, corpse flower bloom. 20 years ago, the city had been glass and steel. Now it was crawling chlorophyll and the constant rasp of corrosion. Dr. Leora Keshet crouched on the balcony of a half-collapsed apartment block and watched the stormlight glitter through the vines. Her breath misted in the salt wind. Down on the street, a Ford pickup, already missing its wheels, groaned as tendrils pierced the undercarriage. The vines secreted a viscous sap that flashed silver before turning the truck's chassis into dust that drifted on the breeze. Metal was food. Metal was all they hungered for. She pulled her hood tighter, shielding her notebook from the drizzle. Page after page of sketches, enzymatic pathways, annotated diagrams of cell walls studded with iron chelation proteins, the molecular fingerprints of a mistake that had eaten half a continent. There was so much she still didn't understand. But time was collapsing as quickly as the bridges. Another 2 seasons in every remaining shelter with a steel beam or copper wire would be skeletonized. Then the skeletons would be people. Behind her, a voice coughed. "You planning to court pneumonia, Doc?" Leora turned. Raphael Rafe Calder leaned against a doorframe hacked from plywood, his one good eye glinting in the gloom. He flicked a cigarette butt into a puddle. The sparks fizzled on impact. "Storm helps me see the fluorescence," Leora said, "and I don't sleep well, knowing the root network is extending almost a mile a week." Rafe shrugged. "Sleep, think, panic. None of it matters till we move. The caravan leaves at dawn. Supplies are packed. You sure you want me on this little crusade? You got that look again. I think I'm hiring the wrong criminal look." She tucked the notebook into her satchel. "I'm sure. You're the only smuggler who still runs salvage out of Providence, and your scrapyard sits on the largest tangle of Ferravora vines on record. If the answer exists, I'll find it in your junk heap." Ferravora. Latin scene name coined by lawyers before the courts evaporated. Ferry for iron. Vorer for to devour. They had been engineered as hyperaccumulators to extract rare earth metals from low-grade ore. A decade later, here they were mining the skyscrapers. "Fine," Rafe said. "We leave at first light. Just try not to die." She managed a wan smile. Professional courtesy. "I was going to ask the same of you." They traveled in a rusting flatbed whose wooden planks were bolted, literally, to the frame with plastic fasteners. No iron, no steel. The vines ignored carbon fiber and polymer, so the chassis looked like an arthritic insect, built from scavenged boat hulls and PVC conduit. Every few miles, Leora glimpsed why such absurd measures were necessary. A line of highway guardrail drooping like wax, skeletal telephone poles stripped of wire, or an abandoned Humvee reduced to a puddle of orange sludge, while Ferravora leaves fluttered triumphant over the husk. Rafe kept his foot light on the accelerator. The engine was a jury rig of aluminum block parts, and a ceramic fuel cell, no ferrous metals. He'd lost 2 trucks to the vines. Experience kept his wrists steady as they skirted Providence's outskirts and rolled west, following roads that blurred beneath weeds sprouting from old expansion joints. They camped behind a toppled billboard near the Scituate Reservoir. The air smelled of pine and oxidization. Leora set up her portable lab, vacuum-sealed vials, a cracked microscope lens, strips of reagent paper that turned a bruise black, in the presence of the plant's sap. She sampled a vine hiding under the billboard's aluminum skin, shaving tissue with a ceramic scalpel. Under magnification, the cells shimmered, each vacuole packed with organelles, brimming with magnetite nanoparticles. "See this?" she murmured. Rafe handed her a cup of chicory brew. "Looks like glitter paint." "Look closer." She adjusted the focus so he could see the mitosis, each daughter cell copying the genetic hack that let Ferravora refine metal like bacteria refine sulfur. We tried to splice in safeguards, sequences that limited their diet to low-grade ore tailings. We were so proud of our kill switches. Then a single-point mutation, and steel became lunch. He tilted the cup at her. 2 unintended consequences. She didn't drink. Instead, she asked, "Where did you get this truck's power cell? Ceramic like that isn't easy to mold." "Traded with the Camden Freeport for a ton of rust flakes. They use them as fertilizer. Iron, but already oxidized. Tricks in the texture. Plants can't break it down fast enough to matter." "Interesting." She jotted a note. "Surface area limiting enzymatic access. That might be part of a strategy." Rafe watched her scribble. "You think you can stop them?" "Not stop. Redirect. Starve them of what they crave long enough to..." She sighed. "I don't know. I have hypotheses." He poured himself more chicory. "Hypotheses are what got us here." At dawn, storm clouds burned off, revealing the skyline of the old industrial corridor. Worcester lay ahead, a warren of warehouses where a century of rail lines once met. Now, rails lay chewed into scarlet dust. Above them, fluttered kilometers of vines, a canopy rattling in the wind like a cathedral roof made of razor leaves. Rafe parked beside a chain-link fence, whose bottom half was gone, eaten away along with the metal staples that held the mesh. Beyond stretched Roland Materials' abandoned research campus, where the Ferravora had first been birthed. Rumor said the secure vault still held seed stocks, archived genomes, and maybe, if fortune had a sense of humor, samples of the competitor strains designed as biochemical off-switches but never released. He checked his revolver. 3D printed polymer body, ceramic barrel, firing graphite slugs. "We're in luck," he said. "Foliage is thicker near the loading bays. Means fewer scavvers." Leora hopped from the truck. "And also means the root network is densest beneath the bays, which means sap flow is higher, which means we need to hurry." They crawled through broken masonry into a loading corridor. Overhead, lights hung from cords stripped of copper. The glass tubes were intact but useless. The vines pulsed along the walls, tendrils sniffing at the plastic buckles on Rafe's pack, but losing interest. Leora brushed one with gloved fingers, noting how it recoiled from synthetic fiber. No living thing had been safe once the plants developed hemerythrin analogs, proteins that bound iron and hemoglobin as easily as they bound rebars. But humanity had responded by wrapping itself in polymers, ceramics, even silk laminates stolen from ancient armor designs. That's what survival looked like now, a culture masquerading as Tupperware. They reached a biometric door. The vines had melted its steel frame, but a slab of reinforced polycarbonate still hung on hinges. Rafe kicked twice and it fell inward. Inside, a row of refrigerated cabinets hummed on emergency solar battery. The last of civilization's hum. Leora rushed forward. Each cabinet was labeled germplasm, chimera records, auxiliary symbiotes. "Help me," she said. Rafe steadied her as she pried open symbiotes. Inside floated vials of fungal spores, their labels bubbled but legible. She scanned them. Serratia ferradaptor, A. Niger var, cuprifage. Her eyes widened. "Here, Fusarium vitricida K4. That's it." Rafe holstered the pistol. "Friend of yours?" "In theory, it was meant to parasitize Ferravora roots, blocking the iron uptake pathways. Field trials were postponed after budget cuts. We thought we had time. She traced the vial with a trembling finger. If these spores are viable, we might have a biological kill switch. The roar came from behind them, like a waterfall of gravel. Rafe spun just as a wall of vines collapsed through the corridor ceiling, showering them with dust. The plants weren't hunting the plastic in Leora's jacket. They were hunting the humming of the refrigeration units, transformer coils wound in copper. Run! Rafe grabbed 2 more vials at random and shoved them in his belt pouch. They sprinted, ducking under snapping tendrils. One slashed Leora's backpack, exposing a steel zipper. Instantly, vines darted in, their tubular mouths exuding acid. She tore the pack away, losing half her notes. They burst into the loading dock. Sunlight blinded them. Rafe hurled a ceramic flashbang. He called them scarecrows. It exploded in a shower of ultraviolet powder. Ferravora recoiled, sensitive to the high-frequency light, but others pressed forward. The effect would last seconds. "Truck!" Leora shouted. They dove into the cab as vines licked the fenders. Rafe gunned the accelerator. The engine whined. The truck lurched across crumbling asphalt. Sap spat on the windshield, etching white scars. The nearest vines clung to the rear bumper, harmless plastic. But they searched for screws, washers, any trace of steel. When they found none, they dropped away like spurned lovers. Mile by mile the growth thinned, giving way to goldenrod and cheatgrass. Only after both could breathe without tasting metal did Rafe slow. He pulled to the shoulder of a dirt road near a derelict farmhouse. "Show me," he said. Leora removed the surviving vial. The spores inside floated snow-white. Fusarium is fungal," she began. "It colonizes Ferravora's xylem. In lab tests, it disrupted the metal-binding proteins, forcing the plant to metabolize normal soil ions. Without iron, the vines weaken. Eventually, they photosynthesize like any leaf, no longer corrosive. Sounds tidy. There's a complication." She tapped the label. "Fusarium K4 is copper-dependent. We engineered a cofactor requiring copper ions so the fungus couldn't spread in healthy soils. It was a fail-safe. But out here, copper's as scarce as steel now." Rafe scratched his beard. "Maybe not. My yard's full of it. Old wiring, bus bars, the kind no one risks hauling. Plants don't bother because it's insulated or buried under junk." "Enough to feed the fungus?" "Depends how wide we cast the net." He gave a crooked grin. "We'll just have to do something stupid." Calder Salvage sat on the outskirts of Springfield, a 6-acre maze of shipping containers, stacked like a child's ruined Lego city. The vines had encroached along the perimeter, but hesitated at the gates. Rafe had salted the boundary with rusted brake drums and oxidized rebar. Junk food that took the plants months to digest. They lounged there like a pride of lazy lions, slow and complacent. He led Leora through aisles of dented refrigerators, broken turbines, windmill vanes, and spools of green-jacketed cable tossed in coils taller than a man. Scaver crews worked the yard, slicing aluminum with diamond wires, packing scrap into fiberglass sleds. They eyed Leora's lab coat suspiciously. To them, scientists were the devils of the old world. Rafe gestured at a half-buried tanker car in the lot's center. "We call her Moby. 40,000 gallons, epoxy-lined, zero steel. Built for acid back in the day. We refill it with ethanol for the free port runs." "It'll serve," Leora said. "We turn it into a fermentation tank. Grow enough fusarium to lace the entire district's water system." Rafe whistled. "Ambitious. Also painting a bullseye. The moment those vines smell copper leaching out, they'll stampede. We need them to. She pointed at a map pinned to a door. See that rail hub to the east? Underneath lies the original wastewater tunnels, now flooded. Feravora's tap routes converge there. If we detonate spore dispersal charges in the hub, the suction will pull mycelium straight into the heartwood. Rafe folded his arms. You're talking about a suicide run. She met his gaze. I'm talking about a cure. Maybe the last. He rubbed the scar over his blinded eye. All right, Doc. Let's commit grand theft salvation. For 2 weeks they labored. Workers in polymer gauntlets stripped insulation from copper coils, tossing wire into grinders that chipped it into confetti. Leora brewed nutrient broth from corn mash and trace minerals. The scrapyard began to reek of yeast and wet pennies. At night, while fungus multiplied in Moby's cavernous gut, Rafe and Leora shared stories by battery lantern. She spoke of her graduate years, splicing genes to clean the planet of mining waste, believing science could rewrite greed. He told of border runs, smuggling 3D printed joints to prosthetics clinics stripped of supply chains. Between them grew something like respect, maybe more, but neither named it. The world was fragile enough without fragile words. On the 10th day, Leora peered into the tanker's inspection port. A snowdrift of spores blanketed copper plates, suspended across the liquid. She sampled the slurry, stained a slide, and grinned for the first time since Providence. It's viable, she whispered. Rafe leaned in. You sure? She nodded. Time to load charges. The plan required 6 drones, quadcopter frames carved from carbon composite, each with a ceramic pump and a liter of concentrated spore slurry. Rafe flew remote missions before, dropping contraband over militia checkpoints, but no air corridor had been as deadly as the one they plotted now. Straight into the Worcester rail hub. Just before dawn, they rolled the flatbed into position on a nearby ridge. The hub spread below, vines thick as kelp swaying over fissured asphalt. A tangle of overhead power lines dangled, unwired. Somewhere beneath, the subterranean aqueducts gurgled. Rafe powered the first drone. Rotors whirred silent. He lifted goggles. Once I breach the canopy, signal strength dies. Autopilot will take them deeper on preset altitudes. We lose real-time eyes. Understood, Leora said. Payload disperses on impact. Pressure valves rupture at 5 meters per second. They hit vines, splatter spores, hopefully get sucked downward. Pray the fungus likes plumbing. She placed her hand on his shoulder. Thank you. He barked a laugh. Wait for the thank yous till the vines stop eating bridges. The first drone leapt. 5 more followed, black moths threading the dawn. They dove through holes in the canopy. Seconds later, the telemetry feed crackled, then died. Nothing happened. Wind rattled leaves. Feravora rippled, but in the same languid hunger as always. Rafe cursed. Maybe the slurry clogged a pump. Leora scanned the horizon. Give it time. A minute. 2. She began to doubt. Then she smelled it. Coppery petrichor, like blood and rain. The vines convulsed. Their emerald sheen dulled to bruise purple. Leaves curled, stems blackened along vein lines. It's binding the iron, she whispered. Across the rail yard, 1,000 tendrils writhed. Some collapsed, others lashed blindly as though in pain. In the distance, she heard a roar. Not mechanical, not animal. It was the sound of rust turning to mud, of something ancient surrendering. Rafe exhaled. We did it! But Leora's triumph faltered. She pointed. Look! Beyond the yard, the canopy was moving, flowing toward them like a tide. Feravora from adjacent blocks sensed the copper bountiful in Moby's broth, evaporating through ventilation stacks. They slithered over rooftops, climbing, racing, obsessed. "They'll overwhelm the yard," she said. Rafe's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Then we lure them somewhere else." He spun the truck around, flooring the accelerator back to Calder Salvage. By the time they arrived, the first vines were breaching the gates, ignoring rust decoys, beelining for the tanker. Rafe jumped out. "Help me rig Moby to the flatbed. You can't outrun them." "Not planning to." He slapped the tanker's flank. "I'll drive it to the hub. Give them the copper buffet they crave right on top of the aqueduct. Then we blow the shell, flood the tunnels with everything left." Leora shook her head. "That's suicide." He smiled, weary and bright. "Thought we covered that." She grabbed his collar. "I'm going. Need you alive in case this works." He pried her hands gently. "The world will need a botanist who understands fungi, more than it needs another thief." Tears blurred her vision. "I don't want—" He kissed her forehead, a swift, disarming press. "Tell the story right, Doc. Make them believe science can redeem itself." Then he climbed into the cab, started the engine. Moby groaned as the flatbed crept forward. Vines poured behind like river rapids. Leora stood on a shipping container, watching him disappear in a green storm. Her fists clenched around the last vial of spores, a reserve dose. If Rafe failed, she would try again, and again, until the world was steel and glass once more, or she was dust. The explosion came at twilight, a column of teal flame. Shockwaves shuddered through the ground, rattling windows miles away. For an instant, every vine in view froze, each leaf a blade of stained glass. Then color drained, turning gray as ash. Tendrils sagged, roots buckled, and the city exhaled a century of stolen iron in a single, rust-scented sigh. Silence followed. So complete, Leora could hear her heart, a ferrous drum still beating in the cage of her ribs. She waited for aftershocks, for vines to twitch back to life. Nothing. She walked streets once impassable, stepping over brittle husks that shattered under her boots. At the rail hub's crater, steam rose off black water laced with fungal mats. Ceramic shards and melted polymer drifted where the truck had died. Of Rafe, no sign. She knelt, submerging the last vial, letting its spores join their kin, a final libation for his ghost. Clouds parted. Starlight glimmered on skeletal skyscrapers, suddenly safe from hunger. Somewhere, deep in the soil, Ferravora roots were forgetting the taste of iron, remembering sun and rain and the ordinary labors of green things. Leora stood, wind tugging her coat, and imagined bridges reborn, engines hammered anew, children climbing steel jungle gyms without fear. Redemption would not be quick, but in the hush, she heard it beginning. The quiet work of fungi gnawing at arrogance, of a planet stitching over scar tissue, of a promise kept by a criminal and a scientist at the end of the world. She turned toward that world, ready to teach it how to grow again.